Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character at a time. And it all comes down to one thing: a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. Well, this is a short series that I am doing that combines Zettelkasten cards on a specific topic with helping people who are reading my book, Writing with Emotion, or those who have the book on order and it hasn't arrived yet, or even those who have no intention of ever getting the book. What I'm doing with this series is giving you some basic vocabulary to talk about the concepts that are in the book Writing with Emotion. And even if you don't have that book, you can use these concepts to bring some emotional understanding into your stories and begin to get some advantages from understanding the motivation that drives people's behavior, because it's that motivation also gives rise to emotions. And so that's what we've been studying closely right now. We've been trying to get a handle on where do these emotions come from? And we looked at it historically because when it has been studied by psychologists or biologists, it's been very hard for them to get any kind of a handle on organizing human emotions. They're very squirrely. When you look at it from the standpoint of psychology, they seem to be all over the place. Now, certain ones are definitely considered to be positive and strengths, and books like Peterson and Seligman's big tome, Character Strengths and Virtues, have attempted to catalog these positive character traits. And when the biologists have tackled it, it's been even more difficult. They find the same neural pathways are used for this multiple different emotions, and emotional reactions vary from culture and presumably across different times. And there has been a tendency to just basically throw up your hands both in psychology and in biology and saying, well, there's scarcely any accounting for human emotion. We can just observe them and we feel their importance, but, well, we can't get much of a handle on them. Well, it turns out that you can, at least if you're doing fiction writing. Now, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't say for psychology, and I'm not a biologist, so I can't say for biology. But I can say that if you are a fiction writer and you want to be able to convey emotion in your writing, you jolly well can get a handle on it. And the secret is one word: struggle. So after we nailed that down, then we were looking at, well, what makes up a struggle? A struggle for what? And the answer is a struggle to make a decision, because when you're writing a book and we're dealing with fiction characters, it's the decisions that your characters make that drive the story. And so we came to looking at what makes a character make a certain decision. And we discovered that there are actually three voices. So if struggle is an important word, voice is an important word. Three different voices that make up the struggle. One is the voice of the struggle itself. We just call it struggle. And it's a very logical, not very passionate voice at all. It's basically the voice that lays out the facts of the matter. And if you're going to make a decision, then you better consider the facts of the matter. And here's the facts of the matter. There's not a lot of emotional content in the voice of the struggle. Then there's the voice of loss. And the voice of loss says, you're not going to get anywhere with this. What are you even trying for? Blah, blah, blah. It's a put-downy voice. It's a nagging voice. It's the voice of discouragement. Not a lot of fun, but hey, haven't we ever heard that voice in our own heads? Oops, we're fiction writers. Haven't our characters heard that voice in their own heads? Of course, we've written that voice into our characters. But there's fortunately another voice, and that's the voice that says, hey, you can do it. It's not going to be that hard. Give it an adventure. Give it a try. You can do it. It's the voice of encouragement, and we call that the voice of victory. And that voice has certainly played in your character's head as well. So it's those three voices that become very important, and it becomes the way that we understand emotions well enough that we can convey them to our reader. We can write with emotion. Even if you don't have the book, you can get a start on this by understanding those three voices. So our next analysis was to take a look at Well, are all three voices present at the same time? And the answer is, well, sometimes all three voices are present. When all three voices are present, the character equally hears the logical voice, the encouraging voice, the discouraging voice, and the character is capable of making a free decision about what they want to do. We call these the rudder traits because they steer your story. And we draw them on a character profile diagram, which you'll see in the cards when we go over to the down-facing camera. Then next, we looked at the case where one of the voices drops out. And the voice that we dropped out was that nagging voice of discouragement. And when the nagging voice of discouragement falls away, and the character is only listening to the voice of logic and the voice of encouragement, well, there's a much, much higher chance that the character will make the choice that will stabilize his life and add stability. And so we call those traits the anchor traits because they stabilize your character. Well, we're going to drop a different voice out today as we continue our pattern. And I've got the cards ready over in the down-facing camera, and we'll talk about what voice is going to disappear now. But before we run over there, I do want to talk about one thing that's a little bit of a sneak peek of an advanced topic. So are you ready? This is an advanced topic, but it's powerful once you put it together with those voices. Remember the voice of the struggle? The voice that was so calm and logical and just gave you the facts as they portray with no great emotion? Well, what if your character has the facts and does not have them on straight? What if your character has inaccurate beliefs? What if your character has self-limiting beliefs? Well, guess what? Those will be calmly and dispassionately and non-emotionally presented to your character. Well, now you know you're a woman, and that means you can't be a doctor. Who said so? That's a self-limiting belief. Or maybe it's you come from the wrong economic class. You can't afford to go to college. Who said so? But the trouble with those self-limiting beliefs and those inaccurate beliefs is that the mind of your character can deliver them just as calmly and factually as things that are really true. So you got to be careful with those, but it does give you an interesting story element when you mix them in. So there's a writing tip for you today. Well, let's go on over to the down-facing camera, and we'll take a look at what happens when a different one of those voices drops out. So come on over to the down-facing camera. Okay, so here we are, and now we can see the voice that we're going to drop out this time. What happens when struggle and loss are there, but not the voice of victory? When that happens, we're going to say that we have a wing trait. And let's see why we say that. When your character hears only the voices of the struggle and the loss, it's extremely difficult to choose not to follow the voice of the loss. The voice of the struggle isn't putting any pressure on the character, and the voice of the loss is. So following the voice of the loss is going to lead to chaos in your character's life or the situation in your story. So we call these the wing traits because they make your character seem more flighty. You can find this in the book on page 17. Now, we've been working with this diagram, which we call the character profile diagram, and it's a convenient way to put on a single file card all of the character traits that are of importance for a given character in your story. So it's a very economical way to store information about your character. And we've said that you can use either the big, fancy, colorful version, or you can just do a little stick version in black and white that accomplishes the same thing. And we said that across this center bar, we would say that those were where we'd put the rudder traits that steer. Across this middle position, they steer. And these are the anchor traits that we looked at last time. They kind of point downward and solidify things for our characters, so we call those the anchor traits. And now today, this is where we're going to put the new wing traits, E and F, up in the air like they're flying, up in the air. And these are going to be where we're going to put the wing traits. Now, once again, we're going to have two different terms, wing trait and wing position. When we're talking about the character himself and how his character behaves, we talk about the wing trait because the character has the character trait. When we're talking about the diagram where we're going to write them down, we talk about the wing position, because that's where we're going to write the wing character traits for our character. So a wing trait is in the wing position. On the character profile diagram, the character himself has a wing trait. So let's take an example just to reiterate. If we had dependability and foresight as wing traits for our character, on the stick diagram, we'd put them at the two up bars, dependability and foresight, and that would be these green lines on the character profile diagram. Okay, then to summarize, when struggle and loss are there but not victory, we have a wing trait. Wing traits and wing positions are much the same. For wing traits, the voice of loss usually wins. So now we can see how far we've come in the study of the character traits so far. We've discovered that we have three voices that help, hinder, or ponder, and that's the victory, the loss, or the struggle character voices. When all three voices are present, we have a rudder trait. When just the struggle and victory are there, but not loss, we have an anchor trait. When the struggle and loss are present, but not victory, we have a wing trait. And in the total scope of what we're covering in this mini-series, we've already learned that to understand emotions, you have to focus on the struggle. And it's the voices in your character's head that reveal his power to decide. When we're finished looking at all the voices, we still have to cover how plot is often driven by changes in the emotional profile, and we'll brief look at where the 28 character traits come from. Okay, so what's ahead for our study of the voices? Well, we've looked at the case where we've got all three present, and we've looked at two different cases where one of the voices drops out. Next, we have to look at cases where two of the voices drop out, and we will cover those two examples together in one, because I think by now we're getting the hang of it. And when we finish discovering those remaining two positions on the character profile diagram, we will be done with looking at the voices. As we talked about this new character trait, the wing trait, I've been promising you that whether or not you intend to get my book, there's still value to be gotten from this course in terms of enhancing your writing just based on what you're learning about the voices in your character's head. So what's your writing tip for the wing traits? Well, there's a dramatic power here that you need to be aware of for your story. And this is that when a character trait is in the wing position, where the only thing your character can hear is the naggy voice and the supposed voice of reasoning who might not get everything correct, a little like some of the AI programs in that regard, that voice can sometimes hallucinate, but where it only has the voice of loss and the voice of reason, the character is really not free to deal with the problem. The character really isn't free to make a choice. So this really shows up in your story in that you can create a story in which your reader will understand immediately at a visceral level and may not even be able to state it intellectually, but they will get it. All your character hears is nag, 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 and gee, I oughta, and I wish I could, and no encouraging voice at all, your reader is going to understand that that character is not going to make any improvement in their situation until they improve their voices. And that's your writing tip for today. That plus the one we had in the introduction, that the supposed voice of reason doesn't always get it right. See you tomorrow when we'll discuss the last two remaining positions on our character profile diagram. We'll treat them in one video. See you then. Bye-bye.